I don't know if I can take it anymore.
When you are depressed, you don't want to get
It
out of
seems
it.
so hard
You
today.
don't want to be bothered with anyone.
I don't have any
But
motivation.
overcoming depression is going to require that you get up and engage with life again.
All I want to do is sleep.
When you are feeling down, the worst thing you can do
The last thing
is
I want to do is
isolate
hang out
yourself,
with my friends.
because isolation actually intensifies sadness.
I don't think this will ever
So
go
I
away.
recommend finding a distraction that will shift your energy.
I wish somebody would just save me from this mental hell. Thank you for joining us on the Mental Hell podcast, where we're going to discuss things that kind of basically make people turn mentally insane sometimes.
Oh, we
Today-
don't use that word.
Oh, no, we don't use insane. So today I have with me Mary Joye, and she has written a new book about coming out on how to navigate with a narcissist. So you can't go no contact all the time with narcissists. There's a lot in our community. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Barbie. I'm glad to be here. I'm
Love
very
it.
glad to be here.
So I know in your new book, let's talk about what inspired you to write on the topic of narcissism.
Well, I think everybody has had narcissists in their life, so I certainly am not narcissistic enough to think I'm the only one. I think they're everywhere. In fact, I started my book saying going into the ocean and swimming and not thinking there's any sharks out there is like living life, and not thinking there's not any narcissists out there. There's a lot of them, and there's narcissistic personality disorder, which there aren't that many people with that. There's just selfish, jerky people out there, and we have to learn to navigate them without having to go no contact. I don't think that's realistic. I was inspired because I had a self-proclaimed parent that was a narcissist. My dad was a psychiatrist, and my mom and my brother were kind of hard to navigate. So we coexist with them. Sometimes we have to act like them in order to get along with them. So we're going to touch on some of those things today. It'll just come out organically.
Love that. And I know you work with the family court in help mediating things. Can you give
Yes.
us an idea? Because I know, so I'll tell you myself, that I've been through a divorce with a child. And I would say my ex was a narcissist, although maybe I am too, who knows? But it was a very, very difficult experience because of the gaslighting. There was a lot of gaslighting. And so can you give us like an idea? Because I would imagine that there's quite a few people who have gone through a divorce, even if they don't have children, with a narcissist, and what you see in that environment.
Well, first off, I love the word gaslighting, but it's brainwashing. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It is trauma bonding you. It can be to a small extent or a heinous extent. So it's like a spectrum of the trauma bonding, which means they've used kindness. If you're divorcing a narcissist, they're real nicey nice, and then they're horrible.
Yes.
And they really have a belief of what's mine is mine and what's yours is mine. They
Yes.
don't settle easily, and they usually end up in court. Mediation, I am a mediator. Mediation does not usually go well with them. They usually end up getting referred to the court because they don't want to turn in their list. They don't want to turn in their financial affidavits. And they call it contempt of court when they don't do that. And you start having contempt for them. And contempt is one of the things that'll break a marriage apart. And so it's very difficult to navigate a divorce with a narcissist, especially with children, because they might use your children as weapons.
Absolutely.
That is the most dangerous thing in the world, when they start using them as weapons.
And for some reason, it just feels like when you're working with a narcissist, they don't see anything that they're doing as wrong or bad or anything like that. It doesn't matter if it's not what's beneficial to the children, it's their way.
True. They do see it as bad, actually. That's,
do they?
in researching all of this, I wish I didn't know so much. They absolutely know what they're doing. They don't know why they're doing it. They're driven by a fear of abandonment and self-loathing that they're projecting onto other people, but they know exactly what they're doing. They pretend like they don't. Don't believe the nice one. That nicey nice one, that's not the real one. The real one is the mean one. Because if somebody, many times they'll do external changes, like if you begged your narcissistic spouse to do the laundry and then you filed for divorce and they start doing the laundry, they knew how to do it all along. So I'm using a very benign example, but don't trust the nice one if you have a pattern of kindness and meanness, kindness, meanness. That's intermittent reinforcement. It actually creates a physiological hook. It creates dopamine when they're nice,
Wow.
and then it takes it away when they're not, and it puts in cortisol and adrenaline. So it's actually an addiction to this person. If they're happy, I'll be happy, and then keeping them happy makes you unhappy. Sound familiar?
Absolutely. It's so crazy to hear you describe that because I haven't talked a lot about narcissism, but that experience and what you're saying is exactly how I felt. And I felt like, because the nice part would come in and the part where they would do things, there was hope. And then as soon as you
Yes.
get hope, it's like all ripped
They,
away.
they pull it
Yeah.
out from under you. Yes, I was married to one for 20 years. I know how they do it. Because I had,
Oh,
I was set up by parents having been like that. So, that's why I've kind of made it my life's work. Not my total life. I live a good life too, but I've made it my life's work so people don't have to suffer. I want them to know the neuroscience of it. Sometimes when you just have neuroscience, like there's facts, it's scientific fact of what they're doing to you physically,
mhm.
it can help you retrain your emotions to go, oh, here comes Dr. Jekyll again, and I can't wait to see what Mr. Hyde's going to do.
Yes, when you get to look at it from that point of view, because that's where I
Yes,
had to come to, it is significantly better for your life.
it
And
it
that's kind of
becomes more
goes with,
interesting to look
yeah.
at them that way. It's like, I
Well, and
wonder
that
what they're
goes
going
with
to do
the
next.
right. And that goes with the you can't have no contact all the time, right? Like I still have to co-parent with that person as lots of
Yes.
people have to have them in their lives. What can you tell us are some key characteristics of a narcissist, some warning signs that maybe somebody can see that didn't know that they have a narcissist in their life?
They truly only care about what they want or need. It's of detriment to others, a benefit to themselves. They look at people much like a sociopath would. They're on a cluster of disorders. In fact, they're together. I'll spare you the diagnostic manual of that. But they're just selfish people, entitled. They don't have much empathy. They don't have a lot of remorse. They can fake all these things. They can fake empathy. They can fake remorse, but they also don't often ask, gee, what's my purpose in life? Their purpose in life is for you to please them and to be
Mhm.
the center of attention. And they automatically want to gain notoriety, even if there's nothing to gain it from. I mean, in this world of social media, we see lots of this coming out in strange ways. Also, we're using it to help people recognize it. But yeah, narcissists love being the center of attention and twisting and bending other people's will to suit their needs. That's pretty much what they're doing.
Do you think or you probably know, is it like a chemical imbalance? What makes somebody a narcissist?
Well, there's a lot of research going on about that right now.
Ah,
That the old school of nature nurture said that sociopaths are born and narcissists are made. There's a little there's a little discrepancy now. We have better technology. So the jury is out on that. They're
mm,
still doing research on that. Because you do see some children that are just more selfish than others. You have to rein them in a little bit more. And if you have been co-parenting with a narcissist, sometimes they can accommodate that narcissistic parent. There's a researcher named Alan Rappaport that talks about the different ways children accommodate their narcissistic parent. And again, they can act like them to please them,
mhm.
which means they give up themselves, which is what the term codependent is. And I wrote a book on codependency, and this is a follow-up to that. It's okay. I've taught you how not to be codependent, but I'm going to teach you how the narcissist can get you to relapse back and what you can do to prevent that kind of relapse, because it is like addiction. It's very similar to addiction. If they're happy, I'm happy. And narcissists truly will just put you on a pedestal and systematically tear that pedestal down when they feel like it. And again, they know exactly what they're doing, and they know
That's
how
so
to do it,
sad.
and they know when to do it. It's awful. I wish I didn't know that.
Yeah. Oh, I can imagine 20 years of that. That would be heartbreaking. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. And I wish that someone had told me what I'm telling your audience right now, Barbie. I wish they
Right.
told me.
And we're so grateful that you are, right? Because I know that there's a lot of people living in this thinking that they're the problem
Mhm.
because that's what they've been told.
Oh, yes. I mean, yes. And if someone had told me there was a biological component to it, because I really like hard science to go with my touchy feely stuff, because I do write for Daily Om, which is, a very, very loving, holistic website. But I put a lot of neuroscience in there because I think if people know that there's a physiological component to this, it's easier to walk away or to co parent responsibly instead of trying to get them to see your point of view. So don't you see what you're doing? Yes, they do.
But
Don't you
it
know what you're doing to our children?
feels
Yes,
like they
they
don't.
do.
Yeah.
They actually know. And that's the sad thing. We're always trying to prove points with narcissists unless we understand that they know what they're doing and they know how to do it.
Just knowing that makes me go back into my mind and think, wow, so many times I tried to be logical
Yes.
and say, like, this is why this is this way. And it just wouldn't matter, because even if they knew, like you said, they're not going to agree. Yeah. So what are some strategies that you would give somebody who's in a relationship with a narcissist, or, has a family member that's a narcissist, on how to deal with them? Because, we can't get rid of our parents, for example, right?
No, we can't. That's why I wrote this book. You can't. There was a time I just couldn't. And my parents are deceased, or I probably wouldn't have written this book because, like I said, I can always take a lie detector test. A lot of my friends can attest that I lived in that narcissistic environment. But what can you do? The best thing you can do is kind of what we've been leading up to here, is expect less of them and more of yourself.
Mm.
That is the simplest thing I can tell you. Expect less of them and more of yourself. Just expect them to be doing this pattern of behavior over and over and over, and expect more of yourself to detach from it.
Mm.
Resistance and distance is how you detach from it, not no contact, because it's impossible sometimes. But I always say less exposure equals more composure. I used to be a songwriter in my prior life before I became a therapist and a mediator, and I think in rhymes, and rhymes are easy for us to remember. So
Right.
expect more of yourself, less of them, and less exposure equals more composure. Resistance and distance is how you handle them.
Resistance.
Just resist that urge to let them know how they're hurting you.
Yeah.
And keep your distance. They know they're hurting you. It drives them crazy when you detach. I don't know if you ever noticed this, Barbie, but if
They
you ever
get clingy.
detached,
Yeah.
if you ever just said, I've had it, I'm done with it. You went to see a movie. I was in Florida and I was halfway to Tennessee, where I used to live in Nashville, before my narcissistic spouse called. He goes, "Where are you?" And I said, "Well, you told me if I don't like it, leave." So I left. I was just very quiet about it.
Right.
I left. He said, "Well, you just got back from there." I said, "Yeah, I know." I turned back around, and it was just like scrambling to try. He was scrambling to try to get me to interact, and I wasn't going to do it. And I failed over and over and over again. But as soon as you detach, they can't stand it. They will not be alone. They need someone to control. They need somebody to be in a battle with. They can't live without it. They need an entourage, and you need peace, and they create chaos. So you can't have peace, and they keep you so exhausted that it's literally toxic for you.
Yeah.
So if you can just look at them like, this is who they are, and this is who I don't want to be, and quit arguing it with them, and just make statements like, "Well, you told me." I'm use their own words, mind you.
Yeah.
I said, "You told me, if you don't like it, leave." I did. I did just what you said. I obeyed. I actually said that. There was just dead silence on the other end of that phone.
Because they don't know how to react.
Not to their own words.
Yeah, exactly. I remember specifically being in places where I would do my own thing and get happy, and I would be in this beautiful, happy, safe space.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden he would drop a bomb on me, like out of nowhere. And I'm like, I was so happy. You know what I mean? And
That's
it's just
why.
like picking a fight for no reason.
It wasn't
And
out of nowhere. They don't like you to be happy. They're miserable, and misery loves company. It
wow.
wasn't out of nowhere. Watch out. Another thing to note is that watch out when you're really happy, because that's when they'll come after you. They can't stand for you to be happy or do what you love.
That's horrible.
That's what, even though I used the words, "I obeyed you, I did what you said," what I was really saying, the truth of what I was saying was, "I am so glad you told me that. It gave me a perfect out.
Right.
And I don't have to fight with you. I'm going to use your own words. You can't fight with your own words. You told me. If you don't like it, leave."
When you turn that back on them, because what I've noticed is they also become very like revenge, like oriented, right? Like vengeful.
Oh, yes.
And so I would worry, depending on the situation, if somebody was like living with a narcissist and this happened, them just making their life completely miserable because they did something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes. And then you need to develop an exit strategy. You truly do. It's
Mm.
very important to develop an exit strategy. And And my book leads up to that. When you can no longer go no contact, not very good English, but sometimes you just can't. And if you just have to reduce the exposure as much as possible and learn to use their words, not against them, but for you. You're not trying to get back at them. You're trying to preserve yourself. You're not manipulating them. You're trying to use self-preservation. Very different intention. If you try to become like them and get back, they will always win. I'm telling you, they will.
Right. Can they get better?
Can they get better? With treatment, they can. It usually is about 2 years treatment. There's no medication for it. There is some impulse control medication. They can sedate people with borderline disorder and sociopathy and narcissism. You can train them to act like they're doing the right thing. They don't often get better. If they have narcissistic personality disorder, the actual out of a diagnostic and statistical manual of the American Psychiatric Association, they don't usually get better, but narcissistic people can. If they see a consequence, kind of like anything that we do in life. If you eat too much, you gain weight.
Right.
If you're narcissistic and you're alone, which is what they don't want to be, they might wake up someday and go, I need to be nicer. I need to be kinder. I need to be more genuine. Stop hurting people. Stop triangulating people. Like you had children, they'll triangulate children against children, siblings against siblings, mother against father, father against daughter. It's a nightmare. I call triangulation strangulation. Actually, they're strangling relationships out. And at the core of that is them. They want everyone to revolve around them. They are the sun and you are the satellites.
So any advice on living with them? Like, let's say you're a family and you just don't want to separate because you know that it's, you want to keep your family together, and that person's actually a halfway decent person. Well, actually a decent person, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in the good times, you're happy. And unfortunately, they do these things and do manipulate. But is there any living with them? Are there any tools that I know you said like to separate yourself, right? But then you have to deal with the backlash of that.
Right.
So, anything, it just seems like it would be almost impossible to live with that.
Well, it is impossible. Let me put it this way. It's not impossible, but happiness is unsustainable when you live with a narcissist. So if you're prepared to accept the good with the bad and look at the good times of them as respites from their bad behavior, then yes, you can live with them. But as far as being happy and being fulfilled, that's pretty close to impossible. You're going to have to accept less for yourself. And that really, and that's not a good thing. The only way you can survive that is no matter what they say or do to you, just go live and enjoy your life.
Right.
Travel if you want to, no matter if they stand in front of the door and yell, unless if they're abusive, you need to go.
Right.
I mean, you need to develop an exit strategy. I never tell people just leave.
Right.
You have to develop an exit strategy, get yourself financially supported, because a lot of narcissists will they'll either take your money or keep you from having money.
Right.
And they want everything, they want it all. So, you just can't sustain true happiness with them, but you can sustain a modicum of it. I mean, you can have a mediocre life if you want that, if you want a pattern of ups and downs. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And some people have to do that. I mean, people don't even realize they're with a narcissist until they're 60, 70, 80 years old.
Right.
Then we're trying to help them just sustain their own happiness and regain whatever they can of their life if they want to stay in that relationship. Usually they don't, though. It's amazing. After they learn what they're missing, they usually develop their own exit strategy.
Yeah. Once you see what it's like to not live in that world, I think you would look back on it and go, I can't believe I put up with that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then you go back, way back, rewind the tape to the roots of it, find that root cause. It could be your first boyfriend or girlfriend. It could be a parent that taught you to be that way. You could have an alcoholic parent. Right. You could be abandoned, because codependency is driven by a fear of abandonment too. Always say that narcissists and sociopaths feel nothing for no one, and codependents and empathic people feel everything for everyone. Yes. So these are just joined at the hip. And I always tell people they're not attracted to narcissists. Narcissists are attracted to them. You're attracted to the person they pretend to be to get you bonded. And then bam, here comes the Mr. Hyde.
I love that you say that too, because I do notice that when you have been in your life with a narcissist, that all of a sudden you do attract them, right? And like, and the fact that you say that you're not attracted to the narcissist part of it, you're attracted to the person that they portray. I
Yes.
love that because I
Yes.
feel like you get duped, right? You're like,
Oh yeah,
you were
because
so
everybody
great.
blames the victim. I
Yes.
can't stand it. Took me forever to, and I actually researched a lot on blaming the victim. And when I found out the science on that, I just shook my head. I wish I could quote the people that there's a lot of research. So I looked at a lot of it, but part of blaming the victim is part of the just world phenomenon.
Mm,
Well, it must be your fault because, it must be you because things like that can't happen to people like me. People want to believe that the world is fair and they can't get duped either. Well, yeah, you
right.
can. Con
Yeah.
artists, con artists hit up intelligent people every single day,
Right. It feels
every
like there's
single
almost like a
day.
target and they can see it. It's crazy.
Yes. So people do tend to blame the victim, but the narcissist is portraying themselves to be this wonderful human
Yeah.
being. And that's the person you're falling for.
Yeah. And that's the person I think you stick around for too, right?
To see they'll come back and they give an excuses. Oh, I'm so sorry. I acted out. I was so bad. You can't really see what you've got until you have a pattern.
Mm.
You really can't see a crazy quilt, but if you're standing right up next to a crazy quilt, you're not going to see how it looks. If you're just right up next to it, you have to
Right.
step back from it and see, oh gosh, there's a pattern there of just utter chaos. And you can't break a pattern until you notice it.
So going back to my life experiences and my youth, do narcissists use shame a lot? Or is that somebody
All the
else?
time. That's how
I
they
would
keep you
imagine.
trapped. They
Yeah.
make you feel ashamed just for taking up space in the room, ashamed to be alive.
Yeah.
I remember, and may she rest in peace, but I've made peace with it. But I told mom, I said, boy, I'm just ashamed for being alive sometimes because I'm either too much or not enough. And I'm never just right, like a Goldilocks thing. So yes, they use shame all the time. They blame the victim.
Mm.
That's why I tell people, don't ever ask a narcissist a question. Don't say, why are you so mean? The answer is going to be your fault. Even if you say, why is the sky blue? They'll go, well, you see it's blue, but I don't see it that way. There's 10 clouds over there. Don't you notice those? You're
That's
so
so funny.
stupid. They
Yes.
do stuff like that.
All the
They are
time.
that bad.
All
And
the
so you
time.
you don't say, why is the sky so blue today? Don't even ask them anything. Just make statements. Oh, the sky is so blue. Even if they want to yell, why are you so mean? What's your fault? I wouldn't be so mean if you weren't so awful. So you just look at them and say, you're so very mean, and I'm going to go away for a while.
I love
You,
that.
you
That's a
give
good
them no
tool.
room,
Yeah.
no arguments, no questions.
Right. Yeah, because I feel like there's times where it's just like they also do revenge with like the silent treatment.
Yes, stonewalling. They do
Yeah.
it, and they do it really well.
Yes. Then just like all of these things are coming back because like when you can look back on stuff, you can see that there was a narcissist, but sometimes you don't relate all of the different actions and things until you talk to somebody like you and you're like, wow, I can really see, I thought I saw, but now I can really see the things that I've, gone through. And I would imagine having narcissistic parents, because that's part of what you have had.
Mhm.
How'd you figure that out and get to a space where you felt healthy?
I went to graduate school. Now, I had therapy, mind you, earlier, but I never had a therapist tell me these things in the way that I'm explaining them. So I went to graduate school. I remember reading my abnormal psych textbook, and codependency is not a disorder, but one of my professors told me I was codependent. So I started looking at how that happened and the addiction model of that I only feel good if I'm making other people feel good to relieve my own anxiety, because I had a parental role modeling like that. My brother was the same way. He had to have Gucci loafers and Brooks Brothers suits. I got stuff on sale. He got retail,
Right.
that's just because he was a boy. I was raised in that kind of environment. I'm from that time in the world where that was the case. So at age 45, I went to graduate school after being a songwriter in Nashville. They sold my company, which is that, long story short. But that said, I was reading. I said, there's names for this. There's
Mhm.
names for this. I said, now I understand why dad says I'm a full-blown narcissist and I have no intention of changing. Now he actually did, because he had a heart attack
Mhm.
and his chemistry changed. It did, because when
Mm.
people have heart attacks, they get very emotional. So he did apologize, but I mean, I'm talking about, I was almost 50 when he
Wow.
apologized. And So they can see it, but it usually comes just like anything with a consequence.
How did
So yes,
you
you got to be really aware of it. I was aware of it from going to school and reading
right.
those dynamics. It was very enlightening to go to school.
There was a book I read about mothers. I think I have it, but it was basically a book on mothers and different like narcissistic personalities or different personalities of mothers. Because when I think of a narcissist, and I think that this is just a bias in my mind due to my experience, I think of a man. However, they're reading this book, I think it was called like The Borderline Mother or something like that, and how
Oh yeah.
just yeah, have you read that book? But it just
Yes.
basically talks about like a woman, a female, and how she manipulates, and depending on what type of a personality she has, that in this like kind of group of narcissistic personalities, but
Yes.
how she manipulates people, and especially her children, into either, you know, she's a victim or she's this, and their whole life they grow up like, if she's a victim, then they grow up thinking they have to take care of her, right? Her needs are
Exactly.
first. They put
That's a
her
fragile
first.
narcissist, a
Yeah,
covert narcissist.
yeah, yeah.
A
Would you
vulnerable narcissist. Yes, they're dangerous. They're so, again, antisocial personality disorder, borderline narcissism, and histrionic disorder all reside in the same cluster in the diagnostic manual. There's a lot of science to that, and they share similarities. They lack empathy. They really do. And they manipulate. They're highly manipulative. They'll do whatever they have to get what they want.
And I hear you say a lot that there's scientific evidence of that. Do you feel like that is important, or can we not just trust our intuition knowing that this feels this way? Like what's the value of, I mean, obviously we want scientific evidence, right? But we also know
Right.
science changes constantly. So if you went back to earlier psychologists compared
Mhm.
to now, things are always different. So I always find it interesting when somebody is very into the actual evidence on
Mhm.
why that is so important for you.
Well, I'll tell you, I think they agree. I think your intuition and scientific evidence agree. I
Okay.
love intuition. I am one of those intuitive people
Yes.
and and empathic people. Trust that. The way you know you can trust somebody. I'm glad you brought this up because this is with narcissists or not.
Yeah.
If you feel good about yourself around somebody, they're good for you. If you feel horrible about yourself, they're bad for you. When we allow other people to take over our own feelings, like, does that person like me?
Right.
How does that person feel about me? We are dissociating from ourselves and not paying attention to how we feel,
Mm,
because your vagus nerve is really
right.
important. So your intuition runs off of that vagus nerve, your fight, flight, or frozen. So your intuition is part of the scientific evidence. They can't, nature and nurture are, well, as one of my professors said, it's 100% nature, 100% nurture. So yes, trust your intuition. If you
Right.
think you have a narcissist on your hands, you probably do. You
Yeah.
probably do.
And
Trust that.
I would imagine if you are always constantly wondering, are they mad at me? Are they mad at me? Like, then they're probably a narcissist, right? Because I feel like the moodiness
Maybe.
comes with the manipulation. No, maybe not.
Or you might be insecure or socially anxious.
Oh,
It's
well, yeah, yeah.
possible.
Right. That's true too, right? And that could
Yes.
come from,
Which I call like narcissism in reverse. You're obsessed with what other people, narcissists are obsessed with themselves, and people that are codependent or socially anxious are obsessed with other people. So it's like it's in reverse. So it can be a strange dynamic. And it's scary with narcissists because the number one symptom of narcissistic abuse is self-doubt. They
mm,
are always getting you to doubt yourself. That's what gaslighting's all about, from that old movie term.
right.
He tried to drive his wife crazy to get her aunt's money from her inheritance. She pretended the lights, she saw the lights going on and off, and he was doing it, but he pretended he didn't. So yeah, watch out for that. They're going to make you doubt yourself. And the moment you doubt yourself is when they've got you right where
Yeah.
they want you.
So are there support groups? Like what? Okay, let's say I'm in a narcissistic relationship. What's my next step? Like I'm listening to this podcast and I'm like, this sounds exactly like my life. What's my next step?
Well, more podcasts and more. What I like to tell people is please study narcissists and whatever, you don't have to read my book. You don't have to have any particular guru. It's the one that speaks to you. Again, trust your instinct, whoever that person is for you. I mean, that would make me a narcissist as a therapist if I thought the only person that can help you is me. That's not true. The best person to help you is that person you can relate to. And there are literally bazillions of YouTube videos and podcasts on this subject. It's very prevalent right now. I think COVID kind of brought out a lot of it too. People were isolated with narcissists and they said, whoa, I wasn't spending 24/7 with this person. I wasn't seeing the dynamics. I wasn't seeing them work at home. I wasn't understanding this isn't just me they're picking on. This is, this is what they're doing out there in the real world. So the best way to do it is to find someone who speaks to you and learn about the narcissist. But would you please also, while you're doing that, learn how to have a beautiful life yourself?
Right.
I tell people, don't study the narcissist so much that you become, again, controlled by them.
I had a friend who did that. So her
Yeah,
husband.
you just get entrenched in it. You're wasting time that you could be using to go to Europe.
Yeah. She was in a marriage and her husband ended up passing away. And once he passed away, she could not move on from studying his narcissism and pointing out all of the different people in the world who were narcissists, which is sometimes I think people just might be selfish. Like, I think there's a lot of narcissists, but there's also a lot of just selfish people.
Yes.
And manipulative people that maybe don't fall under the category of being narcissist. You said something interesting too. You said if somebody acts like a narcissist, so there's just traits that people can pick up, but they're not truly a narcissist? How does that work?
Well, sure. I mean, because I came out of show business, I can speak to that too. And I love to speak to that because a lot of people think people in show business are narcissists. No, they're usually children who weren't heard as kids. Conan O'Brien made a really funny speech one time at the Daytime Emmys, and he said, we have to save time on the speeches. Nobody gets to thank their parents because you had normal parents, you wouldn't be in show business, which is a joke, but he's pretty intelligent guy. And a lot of people that are in show business really they're pretending to be somebody else, or they're hiding behind a song. Most all of them have a background. Well, the first question of Inside the Actor Studio, it's kind of a boring show for people who aren't actors, but for those of us who were, I was a singer and did some commercials and things. That show meant everything to us because the first question of that show by James Lipton was always, tell us about your dysfunction in your childhood. It was the same question to every single person. He had the same list of questions for every person. And people thought he was a narcissist, but actually he was a great guy. I mean, he was giving credence to these actors, not just their craft, but their life and how they got there. So, some people may appear to be narcissistic that aren't. I mean, before you walk on stage, you better think you're the best thing in the world or you're going to just cave in. Barbara Streisand has stage fright. Carly Simon has stage fright. Kim Basinger has stage fright. These are very famous people. I had terrible stage fright. I can't compare myself to them, but I hadn't used to have terrible stage fright. So you just have to get this sense of confidence and then just, leave it on the stage when you leave. Narcissists never just leave it on the stage. They take it with them wherever they go.
Let's talk about kids growing up with narcissistic parents. Are there ever two narcissists together?
That's actually the best relationship they can have. I wish they would just go out and find each other and compete with each other. When they do, it doesn't usually last, but they leave everybody else alone.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's ideal. Is it also two codependent types getting married? They're trying to meet each other's needs, also taking something that used to be unhealthy and making it healthy. So yes, this is good, but narcissists, they're hard to live with, and being the child of one, you are an extension of their image.
Right.
And you either are compliant or you're defiant. And if you're defiant, you get in trouble.
Yeah. And what does that grown child look like? What would that grown child, maybe would there be particular things that they do that you can see that they were probably raised by a narcissist?
That grown child is either going to be narcissistic themselves and have adopted the maladaptive view of the parent to overcompensate for what they feel is lacking, or they're going to become the codependent doormat type, trying to please everybody, people pleasing, over-serving, overdoing, perfectionistic children. If you see a perfectionistic child and a perfectionistic perfectionistic adult, usually they have come from a background of narcissism or alcoholism, which I call, or addiction, I call faux narcissism, because it's all about the substance. It's not all about them. It's all about them being drunk or high.
Yep.
And so the children suffer in that way too. But you're an extension of your family image if you're raised by narcissists. And if you don't comply with that image, there's hell to pay.
Yeah, there's consequences.
Yeah.
If you're with a narcissist, now you've decided, okay, I'm going to get help. Now when I can decide whatever it is that I need to do, because you're kind of in that world, what's the likeliness that you would pick a narcissistic therapist?
Well, I know there are narcissistic therapists out there. I've never met one.
Oh,
actually.
really? Okay.
Maybe more in the psychiatric field where they've got a prescription pad and have gone to medical school, which automatically is, but even then, I mean, I used to go on conventions with 40 and 50 psychiatrists. So that in itself is a book, and I may or may not write it because it's just funny because they all know how to mess with each other's heads, and being in a place with 40 or 50 of them in one room is, wow, it's interesting. But that said, I don't really see a lot of narcissistic therapists. I see a lot of therapists who are more the codependent type, trying to help people help themselves. And then they might overstep and help too much. If you do have a therapist who's telling you what to do or trying to control you, that's not a healthy. My job is to help people listen to themselves and make their own decisions, to give them back autonomy. A narcissist tries to take your autonomy away.
Okay.
So,
That's good to know.
There aren't a whole lot of narcissistic therapists. If you find one, run.
Yeah. I would just imagine that, because you've been beat down so much, I feel like you're almost attracted to the same type of energy because you're so low all the time in that energy zone that's what you attract.
Yeah, I think maybe, and I don't know, I've just thought about it this second. I think maybe the reason there aren't a whole lot of narcissistic therapists or therapists that are narcissists, it takes a great deal of empathy to sit there and actively listen to someone's problems and a succession of people's problems all day without interjecting yourself in them. We self-disclose enough to be a benefit. And I've had a few clients figure out, they say, oh, I want to, because some of them ask to be my friend or things like that. I said, I'm legally and ethically, I'm not allowed to. They go, oh, I want to because it's all about me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's what a good therapist is going to make it about you. Sure, they're going to interject their life stories. They might mentor you a bit. Life coaches will really mentor you a lot. When I'm life coaching, I do a lot more mentoring. I might share and disclose certain things, kind of like we're doing in this conversation. But for the most part, therapists are really going to try to help you become your best self, not what they want you to be, what you want you to be.
This just popped into my head. What do you think of the idea? Let's say you feel like you might be in a relationship with a narcissist, writing down the moment that things happen so that you don't get into that phase where they make you feel crazy, right?
Yes.
Because narcissists love to say, I didn't say that.
Yes.
I didn't say that. What are you talking about? I didn't do that. Right. So if you could just write it down when it happens, you can go back and go, I'm not crazy.
That's right. Keep the souvenirs. I call that a souvenir. Keep it. A lot of times in therapy, I'm trying to get people, I work a lot with trauma too. Don't just work with narcissistic abuse and trauma. You can be traumatized by a narcissist emotionally, but in trauma therapy, I'm trying to get people to remember wonderful things along with horrible things. That way it kind of balances the brain and it seeks homeostasis, which means balance.
Right.
With people that have been in narcissistic abuse and they're being love bombed in the moment, I'm trying to get them to remember the bad things. Remember, this person that you want to reconcile with is the same person who took your home away. I mean, that's what happened in my case. This is the same person who had your car repossessed. This is the same person that, did this to you and that to you. I'm trying to get them to remember this person that's love bombing you right now is the same person who did this to you. So I'm trying to get them to reach homeostasis from the opposite direction. Remember the bad stuff.
Can a narcissist truly be loving to other people and have any empathy, or that's just not going to happen?
Occasionally they can. A sociopath usually cannot. This is why it's a cluster of disorders, and borderlines really can. And I do see people misdiagnosed with borderline disorder a lot. It's almost always from trauma.
Mhm.
The origins of borderline are almost always from trauma. So it really should be like a subset of a post-traumatic stress response. So yes, they can have loving feelings, but narcissists, they don't really love themselves. So there's a lot of self-loathing going on there. So they're projecting their own self-loathing onto you. If a narcissist says you're big, fat, lazy, dumb, ugly, and stupid, they feel big, fat, lazy, dumb, ugly, and stupid. So if a narcissist is always criticizing you, and I hope this sets someone free out there, Barbie,
Right.
if they're criticizing you, whatever they're saying to you, they feel about themselves. If they're calling you stupid, they feel stupid. If they're calling you, ignorant, they feel ignorant. If they're calling you arrogant, they feel arrogant.
Right.
Yeah.
That reminds me of a kid saying when I was younger that would say, whatever you say to me, it bounces off me and sticks to you like glue or something like that. Do you know that saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because it goes
Yes.
to that idea that, whatever you're saying to me is actually what you're thinking of
Yes.
yourself.
It's projection.
Talk to
Absolutely.
me about borderline, because you mentioned that a lot. I know simply because of my background, but I would imagine a lot of people, when they hear borderline, they're like, what does that mean?
Borderline personality disorder is a terrible misnomer. It usually comes from trauma. They have a habit of creating chaos as well. They are also driven by a fear of abandonment. And the way you've got one sometimes is either love you or hate you, and there's no in between.
Mm.
There's just no in between. And they'll, with the same person, I love you, you're amazing. I hate you, you're horrible. I was working with a psychiatrist one time, and we were sharing several clients that we may thought have had this disorder. I have to be very blanket when I make these statements, but he was pretty funny and he had a good sense of humor. And he said, well, when you don't know you have one, you just sit around and wait. If they love you today and they hate you in 3 weeks, you'll know. I said that, I was in my internships, and I said, that was so helpful for me,
Yeah.
because it doesn't, we're not supposed to have an ego about that. So yeah, you just have to realize, and then say, oh, there it is. They hate me. Okay, there it is.
Yeah. Time will
And,
tell, right?
yeah, because therapists learn to forego our egos a lot. We have to really keep our ego way in a shelf somewhere. Yeah.
What would you say, as we kind of wrap things up a little bit, well, one, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you'd like to talk about? Did I miss anything?
Um, I think I think we've talked about most everything. I just want people really, I want to hammer it home again. There's one thing to study about narcissism, but it's another thing to study about living a healthy life.
Mm.
Please start going for that. When I flipped that switch from going, oh my gosh, these are horrible people, to, oh my gosh, I can live a wonderful life.
Yeah.
I can do that. When you flip that switch, that's when you literally get your power back. Flip that switch in your brain. When you've learned about what they are, it's kind of like if you're studying something awful, something that's, look, COVID, we'll just use COVID as an example, the ultimate narcissist, right?
Right.
The most destructive force we've seen in our lifetime. You can study it and study it and study it and study it. Is that going to change what it did? Is that going to change the devastation? No. At some point, you have to learn, how do I prevent getting sick? How do I prevent these things? How do we as a society prevent people from making viruses that are going to infiltrate and isolate us?
Mhm.
Okay, so same thing applies. You can study all about narcissism, but please study about how to make your life wonderful, because you can have one. I have one. I just go and do what I want, not within reason,
Right.
that would make me a narcissist if not, but
Right.
within reason, enjoy your life. That's what they don't want you to do. So just go do it.
When you've been in a relationship with one long enough, I think you almost forget how to enjoy your life because you're just waiting for the other shoe to drop because
You
you're
feel
enjoying your
guilty.
life.
You feel
Yeah, you feel
guilty. I'm
guilty.
having fun. I feel guilty.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a
So,
grief response. I feel guilty for having fun.
right. And so let's end, if you don't mind, with some tools of things that people who have, let's just say they've either grown up with narcissistic parents, or they're married or in a relationship with narcissistic people. What are some tools that they can do, that they can start, that are relatively easy to find ways to enjoy their life without feeling that guilt that you get from being with a narcissist?
Well, first, they're going to have to do the same thing you would do in a grief response. You're going to have to lean into the guilt, because that's a withdrawal symptom.
Mm.
And because when you live with a narcissist, you are not not literally addicted to them. You're unknowingly, subconsciously, subliminally addicted to them because they made sure that you were physiologically hooked. So you're going to have to be willing to withstand the withdrawal symptoms. It's going to be a few weeks of that, to less contact, less contact, less contact. If you can't go, no contact. Then start doing something, while you're simultaneously lessening your contact with them, start reconnecting with yourself. And if you feel like going to, wherever you want to go, like if you want to go to New Orleans or New York or Europe or Hawaii, wherever you want to go, whatever your means are and you want to go, don't ask the narcissist if you can go, just plan the trip and go. They're not going to like it. That doesn't matter. And you're going to feel guilty and you're going to feel bad and you're going to feel selfish. And the moment you say, and you said it when we first sat down and say, maybe I'm a narcissist. They never say that.
That's what I was
Narcissists
gonna
never
ask you.
say,
Yeah.
they never say it. They
Yeah.
don't say it. They really don't.
Do you
The
kn-
moment I said, I made this list, this is the best tool of all that you can make. This is the simplest one of all, is I ask people in narcissistic abuse when they come in to make a list of everything they'd want in an ideal mate. They haven't met the narcissist. They have a clean slate. They're just a little innocent child in their mind. What's your ideal mate? So they're making this list, and the list, they don't know this. I'm making it for them. I'm taking dictation. The list is always them. Almost 90% of that list is them. They'll say, I want someone who's genuine, honest, has empathy, loves my children, all these things. And they'll go, oh no, that's me. I'm a narcissist. No, that's who you are. That's who you love. Because I say narcissists secretly hate themselves and codependents secretly love themselves. So make a list of your ideal mate, because that's who you are, and settle for nothing less than that. Just look on that list and go, yeah, that's me. And what's wrong with that? That's not even just loving yourself. That's liking yourself, which to me is a whole lot better. We can love people we don't like, and, like people we don't love. So
That almost brings tears to my eyes, because I would imagine making that list and looking at it and then saying, well, that's me. And you see it did bring tears to my eyes. You see these beautiful things on the list and
yes,
help you remind yourself.
it's who you are.
Mhm.
Because people come in from the self-doubt. It cures the self-doubt in an instant when they say, I don't know who I am anymore. I go, okay, well, we're going to do a really crazy little exercise here. I don't tell them what I'm doing.
Mhm.
And I said, we're going to make a list. Now, I did that for myself when I was recovering. And I remember saying, oh my gosh, I'm a narcissist. Look at this list. It's me. I'm such a narcissist. And I went, no, I just settled for someone who was the opposite of this.
Mhm.
And then I sat on the other side of the couch before I did what I'm doing. And then I really started digging deeply into research and the neuroscience, and trusting your gut, your intuition.
Yeah.
Trust that. If you don't feel good about yourself around somebody, if you cannot be yourself, the best advice I ever got was from a female psychologist who was also a pilot in World War II, which that was a pretty amazing woman,
Right.
right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because they didn't use
It
women
didn't
back
happen.
then.
Yeah.
Yeah, it did. She was very rare. Women's Air Service Patrol. And I told her I was dating a pilot, because I waited a long time to date after all this. And I said, what should I do? So she's got these two amazing, she's a strong woman, and she had some codependency in her past. And also she's got a PhD in psychology. So she said this very words to me. She said, you better make sure to let him be himself. And then she said, you better make damn sure he lets you be yourself too. So
Right.
those are her exact words. And I said, well, that just matters for everyone in life, doesn't it? So that's what you need to be yourself. That's what a narcissist is trying to rob you of, being yourself. They're trying to get you to doubt yourself, not be yourself, trying to get you to, they always raise the bar.
Mhm.
So whatever that bar is, if you iron their shirts just right and clean their closets and do everything just right, it's still never enough. So just enjoy your life, be yourself. They won't like it, but you'll learn to love yourself for it. Love your life.
It's been so empowering listening to the different things that you've talked about. One, I feel like it's validating to those who are or have been in the situation, and then giving tools just to start off getting better, to start off living your own life and being happy.
Yes.
Right. I love that.
Yes.
Can you tell our listeners, what's the best way for them to learn from you? Is it read your books? Do you have a podcast? Like, tell
I
me.
do have a podcast.
Yeah.
I've got a podcast and YouTube channel. I'm telling you, people say, I have had a couple of friends say, "Oh, you're so narcissistic." I said, "No, I have all this music equipment. I used to write songs for a living.
Yeah.
I have equipment. I was a lighting design major. I have the lights." I said, "I'm imparting wisdom because I'm older now. I
Yeah.
feel like it's my duty. I'm not getting, paid. I'm doing this, I'm not getting paid in accolades." So they can come to me. That's easy to find me. It's Mary Joye, Joye with an E. I'm a mental health counselor. I'm licensed in Florida and California. I just got a California license, and I can do life coaching, but also it's important for them to find somebody they can relate to, and make sure that if you do go to a therapist, that they understand narcissistic abuse. I mean, really, really well.
Okay.
Not just so many therapists are not trained to know the trauma reactivity that happens in your body.
Yep.
When you've been gaslit.
And it physically comes out in illness. It physically
Yes.
comes out in all kinds of
Oh,
different ways.
yes. It
Yeah.
destroys your immune system because you're just filled with adrenaline and cortisol. It'll make you fat. It'll make you too skinny. It'll make you be able to not eat. It's the same thing as trauma, the same symptoms. That's why they call it complex PTSD. You didn't witness someone die, but you've emotionally died when you're married to one. That's why that list is so powerful. When I read back that list, I just said, oh, it shocked me. I cried when I made my own list, and I was alone when I did it. I wasn't at a therapist's office. I figured it out myself. I got some stupid article in magazines. You should have your ideal mate list, but it meant so much more to me than that. I twisted it around and say, wow, this is who I am. This is not a horrible person. Yeah. I've been told, I'm selfish, greedy, this, my whole life, crazy, stupid, dumb, from birth until, till a few years ago. And I relapse constantly. I always find it now, and this maybe will help someone who says, oh, I can get better. Well, yeah, you can, but it's just like addiction. It's one day at a time. I'm always interested to change. I change that fear into excitement. Like, instead of, I'm going to relapse, what am I going to do? It'll be interesting to see how somebody trips me up this week. I'm going to say yes when I mean no, and no when I mean yes. It's going to happen. It's interesting to see what trips me up and when and how. So you just have to embrace yourself and accept your flaws and live the best life you can, and not study them so much to where you get bogged down.
Right. That becomes about who you are then at that point. Yeah. I feel like a lot of this, and this will be on my podcast quite a bit, is becoming self-aware. Yes. Because that's the most empowering thing. Even if you do something that you didn't want to do or you normally wouldn't do, just being aware that you didn't want to do it is so powerful. It's empowering. It's so that I feel like is a great tool, is to work on becoming self-aware. Why am I making the decisions that I'm making? You know what I mean? Or just knowing, you don't even have to analyze it. I'm making a decision that I'm not comfortable with.
Yes. Yeah. Be very conscious of your subconscious. Self-awareness is important, and don't share things with them. Narcissists love to interrogate you. Share that with me. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
That's a warning
sign. Withhold if you think you have one. Yes. Be very careful. Yes. Self-awareness is the key. It absolutely is. Absolutely is. So I'm glad we've made people aware of this, and remember to, to not just study them, but study yourself and how to have a great life.
And where can we find your book?
It's on Amazon. It's anywhere books are sold. I have a new one coming out. The Navigating the Narcissist is just been proofread, and it should be out in, I would say, 1 or 2 months, whenever that process occurs with publishing. But it should be out soon. But I've got a lot of articles on it, and I have a lot of YouTube videos about, and I make them brief, because people that are in the throes of that, they don't have time. No. It's like, here's why you don't set a boundary with a narcissist, because they're just going to break it. Just use silence as a boundary. That's what they use. Again, it's not to manipulate them or get them back. It's self-preservation. Yeah. You just silently you just use silence as a good boundary. So that's where they can find me. It's easy to find. Joye is my last name.
Well, we love it. Thank you for coming on the show. I will make sure to put all your contact information in the comments. So if people do want to look you up and get some more information, maybe even do life coaching, it'll all be there for them.
Thank you, Barbie. And I hope people get better and feel better and just live your life. Have a good one.
Find some happiness.